Good evening, guys. Thank you so much for having me tonight. I've just been told that I've got to squeeze my 40-minute presentation into about 20, so I'm going to skip through a few slides tonight. But I do want to thank Mel and Mark for organizing me to come here tonight and speak to you guys. It is a really important topic, and that first presentation has highlighted to me how crucial it is that particularly the building industry passes on its knowledge. I mean, that stuff to me, like you've worked out immediately, I'm the money guy. I'm the guy that shows up in the high vis with the hard hat, and all the work health and safety people go, oh boy, here we go, right? So, but you guys are the ones at the coalface building this stuff, doing those difficult projects, and you have to consider leaving a legacy, which is exactly what I'm going to be talking about today. So it is being recorded, don't worry about that. I was going to say continue enjoying your dinner, but I think we've pretty much finished that at this stage. So we'll move on. Who am I? Well, you can tell my Aussie accent is pretty strong. I am from the U.S. originally, Missouri, which is the show me state, and been in Australia now 27 years. I came out here in 1998 for about a 12 to 18-month secondment. Met my wife, was living in near the harbor in Sydney, loving it, and thought this is a fantastic place to be. Olympics and all that stuff was going on. Started my career in the finance broking industry, and then moved into financial planning. So have almost, well, let's see, probably almost 3 decades now in doing all of that. So what are we talking about today? Well, first of all, we're talking about building financial wealth. I'm going to skip through a couple of slides here, but I am going to pause on something on a slide that's fairly important. But the first thing I want to say about this is there's so much information out there, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. How many of you guys on your phones on a daily basis see something weird from a property spruiking business or some other weird crypto scheme? Put your hands up. Who's seeing that stuff all the time? Yeah, and now you're going to see more of it because I just said it, and your phones are listening all the time, unless you shut them off. One guy didn't shut it off. That's a fine. But in any case, you're going to get more of that stuff, and there's so much misinformation out there that you have to be careful. And so I like to keep things very simple when I speak to my clients and when I'm advising them. There's 3 key things that I want all of my clients to do. The first thing is they should all purchase a principal place of residence. I'm going to mention one reason why in just a moment. The second thing is to focus on their super and to maximize that. How many of you are running small businesses, your own building company? Yep. And how many of you guys pay yourselves super on a regular basis? A couple hands go up. Fantastic. Well done. Very good. And the third thing is to have some form of investment strategy running, whether that be through a family trust or even in your personal names or what have you. But those are the 3 key things. And I just want to hit on the home for a second. Your principal place of residence, as you would all know, is capital gains tax-free when you sell it. In my view, and I've been around the world to a few places, there's really not very many countries that have tax structures that are this good. And 2 of them are in Australia. One is your principal place of residence, CGT-free still. Government hasn't got their hands on that. And number 2 is super. When you start a pension in super, you're all aware that it's tax-free. Yes? Nod some heads. We know that? Okay, good. Well, now, if you didn't know that, now you know. So with your home, you can borrow against your own property. That debt can be tax deductible because if you borrow to invest, so you put into a property project, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, or if you buy shares or you invest in anything, could be crypto, could be art, what have you. Classic cars. Who's got some classic cars and toys in the garage? Yeah, one hand went up. One honest guy back there. But in any case, you can borrow against your home. And that's why I advocate buying a home. You don't need to build these big investment property portfolios and do all this stuff that people talk about because your home, which should be your trophy asset, will give you that benefit. The other quick thing I want to touch on is your super, and specifically SMSF. Who here has an SMSF and running an SMSF? Fantastic. Love those structures. The quicker you can get control of that, some of you young lads in the back there, the quicker you can get control of your super and set up an SMSF, the better. The one strategy that I love with SMSF is, particularly for you guys that are running your own businesses, is buying real business property inside of your super. So if you have a yard or you have an industrial unit, a warehouse, something where you're keeping all your tools and your toys, buy that in your super fund because you can then pay yourself rent from the business, which of course is money that you keep in your family structures and within your own organization that doesn't go out the door. Great strategy for super, the commercial property strategy. I'm not really going to talk about investing in trust because it's probably not that relevant, and I have to move on quickly. But the key thing, ladies and gentlemen, is discipline. You have to have some discipline when it comes to building financial wealth. And what does that mean? Well, the rigor around setting up a budget, even if it's just to simply say, I'm going to pay myself first, I'm going to pay myself $500 a month into an investment account, that's discipline. There's obviously a lot of different ways you can go with that, but the key thing is to start something and then to ensure that you're continuing that habit. That's how you create wealth over the long term. Don't do things ad hoc. Don't go, well, this month because we've completed a job and I got a huge payment, we'll whack a bunch of money into super, whatever. Try to be consistent in your approach around that. All right, this is why I'm really here tonight, is talk to you guys about building a legacy. This is so important, and the gentleman that gave the presentation earlier had me at waterproofing. The strata building that I'm in is having all sorts of waterproofing issues, and I bought the unit that I occupy. I talk my own game, right? I have that unit in my super. Now, I don't have any water issues. I'm sure you were all concerned about that, but I don't have any water issues, but I am on the strata committee, and we're raising special levies and doing all of that because we have water problems. So I was quite interested in that, but you lost me as soon as you started talking about strutting and all these other funny terms in the building game. I thought maybe we were talking about becoming a supermodel or something like that, strutting. That's a little dad joke. Come on, guys, give me a break. But in any case, it just highlighted the fact that you guys have so much knowledge that we cannot lose this. We have to be, I'm not a builder. I'm a great demolisher. If you guys need somebody to take a sledgehammer and break down a wall or tear some shit up, call me. But don't ask me to rebuild it because it'll be as wonky as that train track thing that was going up the massive hill. But you guys have got to please start thinking about succession planning. Who here is having that conversation in their business about succession? A couple of hands. Awesome. Well done. Who here is even just thinking about that? Good. Awesome. Very well done. Well, hopefully by the time you leave this room tonight, you'll all be thinking about succession planning and why it's so important. This is a really interesting slide. I want to pause on this for a second. This is my life in weeks. Has anyone ever seen the Life in Weeks website? Yeah, a couple nods. There's a few. If you just Google My Life in Weeks, you're going to get the opportunity to put in your date of birth, your sex, and there's no yes, please answer. It's male or female. Good, a couple more laughs. That's good. And it's going to tell you how much of your life has passed. I've lived 64% of my life according to this. The life expectancy for a male in Australia is 84. I'm 54 this year. So I got 30 more years to go. That's looking like I got to get busy, leaving a legacy in my industry, which is financial services. So there would undoubtedly be some of you here who are plus or minus my age, of course, but it kind of puts into perspective that our lives are pretty short. We only have a certain number of weeks to do the things that are important, be with our family, build a great business, and then hopefully build a business that we can pass on to someone else. And that's what this particular section's all about. Why does this matter? Well, you've built something valuable. Many of you have built valuable businesses, serviced great clients. You might have a niche that you currently work in that no one else works in, like digging massive holes and building stuff next to the harbor sounds to me like a pretty good building niche. But it's important that in relation to succession, that you start thinking about who am I going to pass this thing on to and what value do I want to possibly get out of that. So there's, I guess, two ways to think about it. The strategy is you can pass on leadership, ownership, and knowledge, all three things, obviously. You could retain ownership of your business, but put in someone else to lead it. And then, of course, your knowledge in taking on mentors and things like that is critical. So how many of you guys are currently mentoring someone in your business? Please raise your hand. Good. All your hands should be going up. If I may be so bold to suggest that, please, you have to be mentoring someone in this business to pass on this knowledge. It's so important. Australia is going through, by the way, a huge boom in immigration. We need thousands of homes to be built, and so we need more builders. I have two sons and a daughter, but my oldest son is an aircon, qualified aircon guy, has tons of work. My youngest son is a Sparky. Luckily, he electrocuted himself, but he survived. So maybe that job isn't for him. I don't know. I'm just saying for some friends. Anyway, he didn't want to go to the hospital. I thought it was so bizarre that he thought he was okay. He was going to go to boxing, and yet he couldn't move his left arm. It's like, well, how are you going to punch someone if you can't move your arm? Anyway, thinking about succession planning will also help you protect your business. So there's a few key benefits to you, for you in thinking about succession planning. The first thing is, of course, you protect your clients and contracts. And that's pretty important in the building game because I dare say everything you guys do is contract-based, right? You have a contract that's either fixed term or it's got other stuff, terms that I'm familiar with but can't think of at the moment. But when you start succession planning, you are protecting that particular bit of IP and those things in your business. You're retaining loyal staff. How many of you here have a business and staff greater than, say, 5? Who has a team of more than 5? Okay, cool. So imagine if you went back to your business tomorrow and you said, cool, I'm going to start thinking about transitioning my business and who I'm going to sell this thing to. Do you think maybe some of your team members might get a bit worried about that? Like, ooh, am I going to have a job next year? I don't know. So if you start this conversation with them, and in a moment I'll touch on it in more depth, but it's important that you retain key team members because if you want to realize value in your business and maybe sell it to someone, those key team members will probably go along with the business. Securing the business value is also really important. So when you start thinking about succession planning, you start thinking about what are the things I need to do in my business to realize a really good valuation. And I'll talk about that in a moment. And then, of course, you really are actually planning your retirement on your terms as opposed to some of the common triggers that happen in this game are health issues. Has anyone know of someone in the building game that's passed away this past year or two? Yeah? And hopefully they passed away on their terms, but sometimes that doesn't happen. We get surprised with health issues that just crop up and knock you down and sometimes take you out. But other common triggers, I suppose, would be your retirement. And those are the bad ones, I guess. Well, not retirement, that's a good thing. But business growth sometimes. Businesses grow very quickly, and you find yourself overwhelmed and are forced into a succession planning type situation. A couple of steps, 5 of them, to consider when you're building your succession plan. First of all, and I'm sure many of you are doing this already, identifying the key roles in your business. Who are your important players? What do they do? What are their roles? Have that stuff written down. I don't like doing any of this stuff. I have people that work in my business that do a lot of these things for me. And to that end, if you don't like doing something in your business, hire someone to do it and let them do it. Do the thing that you really enjoy doing in your business and find other people to do the things you hate doing. Hopefully you can find someone to do that. The choose a successor is a really important step because if your intention is to transition out of the leadership of your business and retain the ownership, you're going to have to pick somebody that you think can be mentored and can take over and do hopefully a better job than you. I mean, we all think we can do a great job and we are the bee's knees when it comes to running our own business. 9 times out of 10, someone else is better. But choosing that successor, really important. Documenting a plan. Oh, by the way, the slides and everything will be made available to you guys as the recording, but feel free to take snaps if you want. Documenting some sort of plan, very important as well, and this goes back to getting your team and the people that work for you looped in to have them help you document the plan that you're going to implement to transition out of your business. I've already talked about the training and the mentorship and how critical that is. Make the next guy or gal better. Teach them everything you know and make them better, and then help them become a better version even of you and your business. And then just regularly review that plan. I've already touched on this, ownership versus leadership. Well, the leader is the one who runs the business. It doesn't have to be you. You could just work in the business, and you could have someone else that actually steps in and runs your business. I'm not sure if you've ever thought about that, but sometimes that's a really good thing. I have a COO that sort of runs my team and my business because I don't like doing any of that leadership stuff. I mean, I do, but I don't. I don't want to do it. I'd rather be out here talking to lovely folks like you about ways to improve succession planning than talking to I shouldn't say I don't like talking to my team. I actually do like talking to my team, but it's not something that I really want to do every single day. And then, of course, ownership. You own the business, so you could step back once some leader takes over your business, be the owner sitting in the background, sitting, wherever your holiday home is on your jet ski and having a good time, playing with your toys and letting someone else lead the business and generate revenue for you. How many of you are in family businesses? A couple of you? Great, fantastic. This is a big one because many times we think that a family member is going to be the one to take over our business. And sometimes they're not the most appropriate choice because they might not have enough runs on the board. We got a couple of chuckles in the back. I don't know if that's because of the family business comment. No, maybe not. Okay. But anyway, sometimes, and it's okay if a family member isn't the best one to take over a business, but you got to involve them early. It's important that you tell them probably early on in the piece, hey, son or daughter, I want you to consider taking over the business and running it, and then beginning that mentorship process. And then, of course, you have people like me and other advisors out there that can come in and help you with this transition. And it is absolutely worth the money that any advisor charges, in my opinion, particularly legal advisors, to help you avoid pitfalls and to maybe even see some things that you might not, some blind spots, as it were, that you might not have seen before. I'm kind of already touched on this, preparing the business. You want to, document the systems and ideally, it usually revolves around your financials and making sure that your business is running profitably. I mean, we all try to avoid the tax man. I know that. I see financials all the time. And of course, everybody, wants to pay no tax until they have to borrow money, and then they can't borrow money because they didn't pay any tax. It's the whole conundrum around that. But when you are thinking about a succession, if you are planning on an exit of some sort, you will have to get your business looking a bit more schmick if you want to get a multiple of some sort out of your business. So just bear that in mind. And you probably need, I dare say, 2 to 3 or maybe even 4 years worth of good operating results to do that. And it really just boils down to making the business attractive to buyers. So that's, again, where I was saying earlier, you want to have your team enrolled and make sure they're going to stick around, have good documents and systems in place, good financials. That'll be very attractive to a potential buyer. And I dare say some of you in this room, clearly many of you know each other, might end up buying each other's businesses in some way, shape, or form. So you might consider that as well. People factor, already touched on that, communicating with your team. And it's good to incentivize and reward people in your business to keep them in the business. There's I don't know who said it, but there's a saying, that people say, oh, I don't want to train my staff because they might leave. Well, what happens if you don't train them and they stay? Right? That's worse, isn't it? Right? So, so you definitely want to incentivize and reward your team. Legal and financial, again, already touched on this. There's a number of ways, by the way, and I might just pause on this for a moment, to minimize tax. So there's small business concessions, there's ways to get money into super, there's buy-sell agreements and all sorts of different tools you can use to help the transition from you being an owner to a retired person and recognize and realizing the value out of your business. But getting a business valuation, I suppose, is probably equally as important at some stage. As I said earlier, emergencies often are the things that trigger a succession plan. You're forced into it. Don't be forced into having to come up with a succession plan, please. And the reason for that is because when you plan, or you have some sort of plan that you're working towards, it gives you options, it gives you time, it enables you to control the conversation a bit more and control the destiny, as opposed to, as I said earlier, having a health event where, wouldn't it be sad, and I hope this hasn't happened to any of your colleagues in the industry, where they've just died and the wife took over the business and is going, what do I do, right? And I see this happen a lot with mortgage broking businesses and stuff. It's really unfortunate. So start the conversation, write down some goals, mentor someone. Simples. The final thought on this particular section about building a legacy is, and I really mean this from the bottom of my heart, you guys have built great businesses, no matter what you do. You serve such an important part of Australian society, and taking the dreams of someone from a piece of paper, some architect's drawing, and creating that thing in real life. That is a huge responsibility. And it's a huge talent, like it's a superpower in my book. So, please recognize that you have tremendous value in what you do. And again, I can't emphasize this enough, pass that on to someone. Get more people involved in the game and help them along the way. And planning will ensure that that lasts. Okay, I'm on 19 minutes. How am I doing? Can I go through this one? All right. Cool, let's go. All right. Got the okay from Alex. All right, small property projects. I define a small property project as a single dwelling, so you could build something or do a renovation, a duplex or a triplex. So because I'm in finance, what I can tell you is with small property projects, banks will still finance these. And that's important because the cost of funding for a project is an important input into the profitability of a project. Yes or yes? Yes. Good answer, whoever said yes. So the thing about all of these size of projects on that screen is that you can, for all of them, you can get bank finance. Once you start to get a little bit bigger, you get above 6 units for a small block of units, or your land subdivisions are going, 6 or 7 or 8 lots plus, you're talking about more commercial finance, and you're probably dealing with a non-bank lender that specializes in that. And right now, because the banks have all gotten out of, for the most part, funding those big projects, unless you got, you're doing millions and millions of dollars like a Meriton or a Mirvac or something like that, you're going to a non-bank lender, and they're charging appropriately, which means you're getting hit pretty hard with interest rate fees and everything else. So if you can stay in the bank world with this, great. And again, risk scale as well. I run my business and the way I manage my clients' money to try to de-risk everything. I don't like risk, and I want to try to achieve the result without taking on too much risk. And so the property projects, small property projects, allow you to be a little bit less risky. Because if something goes wrong, like that huge project that the gentleman was talking about, something goes wrong and all of a sudden you've done all this work and the ocean decides to be very angry at you one day and floods the whole thing, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars to fix that problem, right? That's crazy. That's a lot of risk. Now, I guess if the client, where was that property? Was that in somewhere in the eastern side of the harbor or something? Vaucluse. Okay. Well, those folks have got, they've got tons of money to blow on something like that, right? But most of the people out there don't. So when you stay in that smaller project range, if something goes wrong, you can usually fix it without too much drama, right? And we all know where some of the risks are. The big one, as I've been talking about, the funding risk there on the left side of the screen is the biggest. It's being undercapitalized. I have seen this so many times. Builders, in particular, and developers go into projects and they don't have enough money. And their margin is too slim. And there's an F up and it all blows up and they're in insolvency. They've got somebody to come in to wind up the whole thing. Insolvencies, by the way, in the building industry have gone through the roof. I don't know what's going on out there, but it's not a good situation. I have a feeling it has to do with some of the funding risk. The other thing, which is a risk, of course, is our friends in council, right? Are they our friends or not our friends? Sometimes they can be, right? Look, they're doing their job, and I get it. They have codes to apply and the such like, but still, that's a risk. And then, of course, there's all the unexpected stuff, and that earlier presentation dealt with some of the unexpecteds. The biggest one I've seen, of course, is you're trying to dig a basement and you hit some big old rock that wasn't supposed to be there, and another $100,000 to grind that thing out is a nightmare. How do we reduce risk? Well, in my opinion, the way to reduce risk, and by the way, I've brought up the whole small property projects because I think you should all be doing them. As a normal course of your business, let me just ask that question. Who here is doing little projects like that as a part of your normal building stuff? Yeah, a couple hands, good. You should all be doing them. And I'll tell you why in a second. But one of the ways to reduce risk, of course, is to buy land that's already got all the civils done. So civil risk is huge. I did a development up in Queensland, complete shit show, and I had to take it over from another guy, but the civil stuff was a nightmare. And so the moral of that story was when I now do small property projects, I go and buy something that's already ready to be built on. The second thing is, of course, developing under a CDC. So if you're complying development, you can get a private certifier. They can step in there and make it a little bit easier. So if you're under a CDC, that de-risks it. It also speeds things up, which managing time is probably the biggest factor that people underestimate. Time value money is one of those concepts in finance that everyone needs to understand. The quicker you can get your capital in and out of a project, the higher your return. And the more frequently you can do that, the higher your return. It's just that simple. Now, profit potential, this is my opinion and what I've observed in the market, but if you're not making a minimum margin, this isn't a property project, by the way, of 25%, that's sort of gross profit, you shouldn't be doing it. So I would assume you all have feasibility study calculators and things that you're tools that you're able to use to calculate that. Don't do it. If you can't make 25%, you probably shouldn't do it. The time may not be right. Some projects I've seen return well in excess of 40%. And if you can roll those over quickly, that's a really good deal. And I like the metric of doing a small property project every 6 to 9 months. Now, 6 months probably a little bit aggressive, but let's say 9 to 12. If you can do a renovation, buy a crummy old house somewhere in, say, the northern beaches, give it a nice birthday, and sell it to the market there, which is now apparently wealthy Chinese, you can make a profit of probably over 40%. And those are probably bread and butter for a lot of you guys, because I know some of you in the room, and I know you do a lot of renovation stuff. And that's it. How did I go? 25 minutes. You happy with that? I did very well. Guys, I apologize for having to rip through that. Again, this will be available. Hang on just one sec. This will be available to you guys, both the slide deck, which has more stuff in it, and then also the recording. But I do have a moment for a question or two. Yes, sir.
Okay, you mentioned earlier about the principal place of residence and how that is, you don't pay any capital gains or anything like that on it. Okay. And then you transition to do a property development sort of area there. What if the two combine, you've got a principal place of residence, you've lived there for 20 years, and now you want to build 12 apartments on it?
It would not. So this is how you'd probably deal with that. So you're obviously not going to live there anymore once you build 12 units on it, right? What you would likely do there, and I'm not an accountant, by the way, but this would need to be checked. You would value the property. You would then sell it to, say, a development company or something like that. And this might be able to be done on paper. But you would realize the value of it, right, on paper. And that would be the cost base for the development. You wouldn't pay any tax. Eventually, you would get your money out of it, right, for the sale of the property, back to your, to yourself, eventually. But on paper, you'd want to show the valuation at that day that it was sold in the contracts, exchange, and everything else, and you wouldn't pay any tax on that component, right? But then everything forward, yes, correct.
That was my question.
Yeah, yeah. Then answer it? Okay, cool. Any other quick questions? I will be hanging around to talk waterproofing and strutting after the meeting. So if anyone does have anything they want to take offline. Oh, yes. It's not about waterproofing.
No.
Okay, good.
Particularly that self-managed super. Thoughts on federal government and changes to the goalposts? And
Which ones?
yeah, well, multiple. Yeah, 3 million and 15%.
Say that last bit again.
And 15%. Adjusting the taxation.
I think if the government messed around with that, they would find themselves the ex-government fairly quickly. They've talked about negative gearing and a few super things for a long time. It's never gone past the House. The Senate always, goes, sorry, fellas, we're not doing that. Because they understand that, the third rail of politics is always, no offense to older people in the room, because I'm now almost one of them, but the third rail of politics is the older generation. Don't mess with them and their retirement savings and everything else. We have like a $6 trillion transfer of wealth that's about to happen in Australia. And I'm pretty sure that all of those people want to keep as much of it as they can, and they want to give it to their kids and grandkids. So I don't think the government's going to get too cute in trying to change any legislation around, because they will find themselves out of government. But who knows? I mean, my crystal ball is my phone. I ask the Magic 8 Ball of Google all the time, questions like that. But look, they can try anything. But again, I think that they'd find themselves unelected fairly quickly. Yeah. Okay, guys, I think my time's up. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.